This week, there was a landmark ruling from the Supreme Court that extends protections to millions of workers nationwide and is a big defeat for the Trump administration, which argued that Title VII of the Civil Rights Act that bars discrimination based on sex did not extend to claims of gender identity and sexual orientation. Paul Donovan, the chief economist at UBS Global Wealth Management, has a really interesting way of threading some of these social human rights issues and its impact on the economy. Paul, thanks so much for joining us. Of course, I want to start with Trump tweeting this morning. He said, quote, "These horrible and politically charged decisions coming out of the Supreme Court are shotgun blasts into the face of people that are proud to call themselves Republicans or conservatives. We need more justices or we will lose our Second Amendment and everything else. Vote Trump 2020. And let's recall that Neil Gorsuch, Trump's first Supreme Court nominee, was the one who wrote this decision. So that is an interesting development in this choice. So kind of reacting off of this, Paul, what is your initial take? What's your argument here as to why this could be good for the economy?
So essentially, we flip it around. Prejudice, which is irrational discrimination, prejudice is bad for the economy, and it's getting really bad for the economy as we enter what economists refer to as the fourth industrial revolution. Because over the next 10 to 15 years, what's going to make an economy successful or fail in the fourth industrial revolution is very simple. You need the right person in the right job at the right time. That's it. That's the formula for success. And what any form of prejudice does is stop you having the right person in the right job at the right time. And before this Title VII ruling from the Supreme Court, you had about 5% of the American population who could be fired because their boss didn't like who they were dating. That is not generally considered to be rational.
And then just thinking about the competitiveness component, I think you point out in your blog post that close to 60% of the countries around the world still allow your boss to fire you if they don't like your sexual orientation or who you choose to date. Does this really give the US an edge here? Because we spoke with another guest yesterday who said the US had fallen in terms of competitiveness advantage and actually attracting talent.
So there's lots of different factors that come in to affect competitiveness, and I think there's a limit to how far we can push this. If your employer is prejudiced at the start of this week, they're prejudiced at the end of this week, you're still going to face lots of challenges in that sense. But I think what this does is it restores one of the great triumphs of America, ever since John Steinbeck, Grapes of Wrath. Its labor mobility is one of the things that transformed the US economy back at the start of the last century. And what this is doing is restoring some of that internal mobility, because you did have a situation where if you were one of the 10% of the population that is LGBTQ+, you wouldn't want to move to certain states because your employment rights wouldn't be safe, your partner's employment rights wouldn't be safe, and therefore that was preventing some of the efficiency gains that the US could have by having right person, right job, right time.
And Paul, very briefly, there was another landmark ruling out of SCOTUS today in that 5-4 ruling against the Trump administration's attempt to end that DACA program, making 650,000 people who are dreamers basically allowed to exist and continue on in this economy. Do you feel like there's a similar argument to be made here, how it could be a net benefit for the US economy?
So generally speaking, economists regard immigrants as net benefits to the economy. They tend to bring skills. They tend to be flexible, more flexible people. So I would argue that, yes, this probably does enhance America's skill base.
Thank you so much, Paul Donovan, UBS Chief Economist of Global Wealth Management. Thanks so much.
Thank you.